being outside, being, feeling the wind on your face, bit of sun. Like
wind through our hair, right?
Wind through our hair. Right, give it 5 years.
No, it's not even going to be 5 years. So this week we saw a delightful post that basically said there's no such thing as an active recovery session, and that if you want to recover, you should just rest. So we thought we'd speak a little bit about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of confusion often about what active recovery actually is.
Yep.
So when you say active recovery, people get very different things in their mind. For some people, they're thinking sit on a bike for 20 minutes doing zone 2. For some people, it's go and stretch. For some people, it's lift normally at lighter weights. So that there's not really, like, if you looked up active recovery, if you look up the definition of it, it's essentially just that there isn't really a definition. So I tried to do it for a post the other week because I saw that post. I tried to look up scientific definition of active recovery, and there isn't what I would call like a satisfactory overall one.
I'd agree. I think the main emphasis is any kind of work that isn't going to promote a training stimulus, but is going to lead to increased blood flow to an area, and as a result improve recovery. So the point that we were making in the post was basically any work whatsoever is going to add some degree of training stress. So if you're in an overtrained state and you're doing it to try and recover, you're just going to add to the total training stress experienced and therefore slow down the rate of recovery. Which kind of varies a little bit dependent on where that strain's been experienced. So in my eyes, there's like two sides to fatigue, right? Like fatigue can be experienced either at a central level or it can be experienced peripherally. So either you look at the total training stress, and if that overloads your total capacity to deal with training and you feel overtrained centrally, then any further training is just going to overwhelm you. But quite often when we're talking about incorporating some kind of recovery work, we're talking about the fact that training stress has been experienced peripherally, so whether that's muscle damage from a hypertrophy session or metabolic stress and build-up of metabolites because of a cardiovascular session, you're going to experience fatigue within the muscles and increasing blood flow to that area to then help those muscles recover without overtaxing your central capacity to deal with overall training load is going to be beneficial to recovery. So it's that whole thing of it can't be the type of work you do can't put stress on the same system that's already overtaxed. So if you are talking about someone who does a lot of strength training, then a light recovery session would involve aerobic work or flexibility training, because they're going to apply a different stimulus to the muscle, so they're not going to overwhelm a stimulus that's already been targeted, but they are going to increase delivery to the muscles, oxygen, blood flow, etc., and wash out therefore of metabolites and repair of any damage that's in that muscle tissue. So I think there's that. That's kind of my view on what a recovery session looks like, and the fact that recovery work needs to be different to the primary stimulus. Is that kind of like where you sit?
As I was listening to you say that, the thing that stood out the most was like saying, if you do a lot of strength work, then the active recovery stuff has to be a different system, right? Because, I mean, again, it depends on, are we talking about the active recovery to promote like recovery as in like just general training, you're just trying to get back to where you were and super compensate and stuff? Or, like if you're going into a competition, are we talking about active recovery so that you stay primed for.
So I would view that as a different thing. So priming and recovery are two separate things. One is trying to provide some kind of maintenance training load that's going to stop you from losing the gains in whichever component of fitness, so whether that's speed, power, what have you. Whereas the recovery session itself is designed to aid restitution, so help with the return of normal function to your muscle cells, normal levels of metabolites to those muscle cells as well, or improvement in kind of some degree of recovery of like neural fatigue as well. So that's another thing that like we might look at. So even within strength training, right? Like if you've got someone who does a lot of really heavy work, strength training wise, and as a result tires their neuromuscular network and places fatigue on that system, they might be able to do some kind of strength work that's not necessarily as fatiguing at a neuromuscular level, but is fatiguing at a metabolic level. And that could also be seen as recovery. So you could still do, so like when you see kind of Olympic lifters who do loads of really heavy explosive lifts that requires a really good amount of neuromuscular activation, they might do some isolation work on their recovery days, because the fact it's going to encourage blood flow into the area, but it's not going to add any kind of fatigue to their central nervous system. It's not going to add any fatigue to their ability to recruit muscle. It's just based on how well that muscle can utilize energy within it. Like, that's
because it's such a complex system, right? Because like the analogy I always come back to, and I won't go into the convoluted one that I talked to you about yesterday, but like all the different components of fitness, are like taps, right? You turn on the taps, and they've all got their tanks that are full of water, and the tap runs into like a basin, and over time all that water drains and comes back up, right? And you refill it and whatever. Like basically you've got all these different taps, and like one is neuromuscular, one is peripheral, like one is, central
motivation.
You can break it down. You can break it down as much as you want, but I think using the analogy that you used of just like central or peripheral is a good way to look at it. And inducing, you have to remember that all these things, they work on different recovery times as well, right? Like depleting your glycogen is going to recover, you're going to be able to recover your glycogen way faster than you're going to be able to, say, recover your central nervous system or repair damage, eccentric damage to the tissue, actual tissue damage. So like they all work on different timescales across different, levels of recovery, different speed, different overall, different like graph peaks and stuff like that. So like you say, although everything that you're doing is inducing some form of fatigue, sometimes inducing fatigue in that system creates an environment that aids recovery in that system. As long as you're aware that, like you say, doing the muscle level stuff might leave you like a little bit depleted in that system for 24 hours, it's going to improve the recovery time of the other thing from, say, 48 down to 36 hours, right? So as long as you're aware of that and being...
If the goal is just to recover one system faster so that you can hit that system and target that system again sooner, then having a little bit of fatigue in another system to aid that is probably is going to be a good thing. So then it comes on to the training load that we can assign, and that's kind of one of the things that I see people get wrong quite a lot of the time. So they might do a flexibility workout, but they'll spend a load of time on developmental stretching rather than just some kind of like short 30-second holds, bit of breath work that isn't going to necessarily promote improvements in flexibility, but is going to do enough to get blood flow redirected to the area and help aid wash out and improve lymphatic flow and all of that sort of side of things, which is then going to improve the recovery of the system. Whereas if they do the developmental stretches, that in itself is a stimulus, and that does add to overall training stress, and that's going to be a problem. Similarly with cardio, like the people that do bike sessions and they go, I'm going to do a 20-30 minute bike session at zone 2, and you see them pedaling away and just
sweating.
And
you're like, guys, you've missed the point here. And like, let's not underestimate how neurologically challenging developmental stretching is. Like when you're there and you're like in pain, you're like this is, and it's hurting. Like the reason it's hurting is because your nervous system is firing messages back at you being like, dude, this muscle's too long. Chill, stop. And so trying to then say that is going to improve the neuromuscular system back to baseline quicker. So like that, in that case, you have added fatigue there. But like you say, I think one of the main benefits of stretching, you could achieve without even stretching. It's just easier to do it while doing something. Just breath work. It's just focusing on deep inhales, long exhales, nose, mouth, trying to essentially trigger parasympathetic drive and get away from sympathetic drive, because the most powerful tool we have to do that is our breath, right? Sympathetic, parasympathetic. So as long as you're in control of that breath while you're stretching and you're focusing on it, and it's kind of like, it's almost like a form of meditation, and that will help you recover. And then you can add things like ice baths and saunas and other things, which are also valid active recovery elements,
But also stressful.
but also stressful. But stressful in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that whole thing of it's just, again, anything that is recovery oriented will probably have some degree of stress associated with it. But so long as that isn't overtaxing a system that's already been taxed, that can be beneficial. One of the things that I saw that was really interesting while I was like looking into this was I'm gonna absolutely butcher his name. A guy called Ivan Poikin, I think. He's a really interesting guy. He's done a load of stuff on kind of nitric oxide, and he's doing a load of research into how levels of that can be reflective of fatigue within an individual. So it's like, it's really, really, really cool like stuff.
Sidetrack on that, just really quickly.
Yep.
Didn't realise how nuts nitric oxide is in terms of like it being the signalling molecule for everything in your body, which is mad.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We'll have to do a post on that, or like a podcast on that at some point, because that'd be a good topic.
Yeah, because I was reading like the book The Body by Bill Bryson, and I got to that bit and I was like, how did I not know this? How have I done like 2 degrees and been through all that information and never really come across the role of that?
I mean, it's interesting. The amount that it does play a part in the number of cascades, like signaling cascades, it's a precursor for is like, really cool to look at, and makes complete sense when you actually think about its role within exercise, within blood supply, etc. Like, it's not surprising that as a marker would get detected and then lead to all these other changes. But going back to the post that I saw, basically it was kind of talking around zone 2 cardio and recovery cardio, and the fact for the vast majority of people, it's really hard to achieve zone 2 work in one specific type of cardio. So if you aren't an efficient cyclist, it doesn't matter how slowly you go, like you'll still probably get some degree of leg pump from a cycling session. Like similarly to if you're not an efficient runner, running slower isn't going to make you more efficient. It's probably going to make you less efficient, and as a result, it's going to be more fatiguing on your muscular system. So it's like going out for a recovery run when you're not a good runner is one of the worst ideas you could.
Oh, well, I was going to say, even if you're a good runner, like for most people, running is a garbage zone 2 recovery activity.
I don't know.
I would say so.
You say you'd opt for walking instead?
I mean, walking, biking, like basically either off feet or low impact,
just low impact
upright, ambulating. Let's
so
call it.
the reason I'm not necessarily against running is like, again, it comes down to what type of work you do. If the work you do is damaging at a muscular level and high impact, then running is going to be a bad option. But if you don't do a lot of high impact work within your training program, running at a steady state, if you're capable of running efficiently at that steady state, isn't going to necessarily tax your muscles to too great an extent. And if you're not overloading that system, you're just doing a light run, you're probably going to get quite a good amount of benefit. Plus the fact that you're working through that full gait cycle, you're getting rotation through your spine, you're going to get more of a mobility benefit from it. You're going to get I think it can be used. I just think it's really hard for the vast majority of people to maintain zone 2 and to work at a low enough intensity.
That's what I was getting.
Like, so like I think for most people, going out for a walk or jumping on a bike is probably better.
Yeah.
Like jumping on a bike is definitely better. But the thing that he was kind of making the point of was, if you're in a position where you struggle to move efficiently for 20 minutes on one modality of like cardiovascular work, then you could split your 20-30 minute recovery session across 3 different bits of kit and maybe do kind of 5 minutes on one, 5 minutes on another, 5 minutes on another, twice through. As a result, your form's not going to break down. You're not going to overwork the movement patterns associated, but so you're not going to overtax those systems. You're not going to create a developmental stimulus through your exercise session. And as a result, you're probably able to use it as a recovery session. Yeah. So that's,
And you know what? Probably the most important, if you call that real world application of that, is it's less boring.
Yeah.
You get off the bike after 5 minutes, you get on the ski. You get off the ski after 5 minutes, you go on the rower. And your body's like, change. Like, I've done it before where like now I might just plug in to like sit on a bike, plug in, watch some stuff, let my brain like wander a little bit because I struggle just sitting and being still, which I need to work on, but whatever. But if I'm really not with it, I'm like, I've got to go between different things because I can't be there for 20 minutes just, stay at this pace.
See, for me, like, I completely understand that. It's that whole thing. Like, quite a lot of the guys that I train have that as an issue. They struggle to do the stuff that is about restitution. They struggle to do the stuff that's easy. They're really good at doing the stuff that's hard. So what I try to do is I'm like, okay, right, how about we try and combine all of those things into like one session, and we make it a time that is your time, that you get to do something that you don't normally get to do. So like you were saying about combining breath work and flexibility work, viewing your flexibility work as your meditation session, or incorporating some low intensity, steady state, zone 2 stuff at the end of that recovery session as well. And then maybe using that as a time to listen to an audiobook or listen to a podcast you've wanted to listen to for ages, but you've not had the time to do that because your life's busy.
Yeah.
And you can't do it when you're doing your high intensity stuff because you're just going to have to re-listen to it and re-listen to it and re-listen to it, and it's not going to motivate you for your heavy lifts. I think like that's the best way I've found to try and encourage myself and motivate myself to use that time for me. It's like, okay, right, I want to listen to an audiobook. I'm going to spend an hour just doing some really light stretch work, bit of breath work, bit of light work on the bike, but I'll use it more as time listening to that podcast or that audiobook.
I think that's another reason why like walking is a better one than running, because it's so much easier to switch off when you're walking and listen to something else, and like you say, you use that time effectively, whereas when you're running and you're like, unless you're an elite runner and you've got that pattern built into you, most people are thinking about how they're moving and they're adjusting their stride and they get lazy and stuff like that. So and being outside, being feeling the wind in your face, bit of sun, like
wind through our hair, right?
Wind through our hair. Right, give it 5 years.
No, it's not even going to be 5 years. I've been told by Rach that I'm not allowed to shave my head until we get married because she doesn't want to get married to someone that doesn't look like me. But after that, I can shave my head and just accept my fate.
Fair. And I mean, has she ever seen you with a shaved head? Have you shaved your head before?
No, I've never. I've had my hair short, but I've never shaved it.
So you've never seen what your head shape actually looks
like? My head shape looks. It's normal.
Okay, it's normal.
Yeah, it's an acceptable. I haven't got any weird bumps anywhere. So.
You have a coin slot. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So basically, what we're saying is, rather than active recovery just being extra load on the body, it's not about whether or not it's extra load. It's about whether or not that extra load allows for greater recovery in other systems that we are not usually taxing in our training. And I think that's the key take home for people, for me, is if you're going to do active recovery, so say if you're a runner, don't go for a recovery run, probably do some stretching and some breath work. If you lift a lot of weights and you're lifting heavy weights, again, probably don't go for a run, but maybe go for like a bike. Maybe get yourself off feet, like don't put any impact through your joints. If you're a cyclist, don't cycle. maybe go for a recovery run. Yeah.
It just needs to be something different. It can't tax the same system. Exactly. And then the other thing is making sure that it is peripheral fatigue that you're trying to recover from, not central fatigue. So it's not that you've just overtrained completely and as a result are so depleted. Like, I think recovery work within concurrent programming is really difficult because the fact you're taxing every single system all at the same time. Yeah. So trying to add an additional volume that's recovery oriented probably isn't going to work because you're basically maxing out your total training load that you can cope with week after week. So adding any additional load to that is just going to screw you over. Yeah,
that's probably another point to make, is once you fatigue your nervous system with really heavy central nervous system work, i.e. like sets above 75% and you're cooked, that recovery is, you're not going to speed that up. Your body... Like, you can eat well, you can sleep, you can do all the normal things, but most of the time you're looking at 48 to 72 hours until you're good again. And there's not much you can do that will speed that along. No. If you're a little bit fatigued or you're sore or something like that, there's lots of stuff you can do to make yourself slightly less sore. And I mean, even just from if you're really centrally fatigued, you're not necessarily going to speed it up, but you might feel a bit better if you do some breath work or some stretching. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like
Eat some kale.
eat some kale, obviously.
That's the main solution, right? Kale and mushrooms these days. That's the.
Is it?
I think so.
It's grapes.
Based on what's in the latest Huel Daily Greens.
Okay. Kale and mushrooms.
Kale and mushrooms. Kale and mushrooms. Spirulina, chlorella. All the good stuff.
Sorry, cholera.
So in summary, if you've basically maxed out your total training load that your body is capable of coping with, don't try and add in recovery work. But if you are taking a more linear approach, if you do have like single goals or maybe up to 2 or 3 goals at in any training block, doing some recovery work that is not associated with any of those goals is going to probably aid recovery and help you get more load into your training week and hit each stimulus a little bit more frequently. So that's So in our view, I think we're both in agreement that realistically there is such a thing as a recovery session.
Yeah.
But maybe not for concurrent athletes or hybrid athletes.
Yeah. And I think also just, switch the mentality on, like, there's a certain thing I need to do for a recovery session and switch it more towards how can I get into a parasympathetic state, but how can I
get blood flow to this area?
Muscles.
Yeah.
Like one final thing that I wanted to touch, because I think it's quite vogue at the moment, is like touch on those saunas and ice baths and like a lot of people will do like hot cold showers to like stimulate blood flow.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing that I will never forget that I read ages ago is if you are going to cycle hot cold, if you finish on cold, it reduces soreness because it restricts the blood flow a little bit and stops, like, this is immediately after training, by the way, not 2 days after training. If you finish on hot, you actually get more soreness and you
because
get more
of the fact you've increased blood flow.
You've encouraged all that blood to come in and therefore bring all that immune response and do that. So I think don't just, see some influencer on Instagram doing whatever the fuck they're doing. And I can do that at whatever time I want to do it, understand
when
what
it
it's
should,
doing, when to do it. Like cold exposure in the morning, great. Cold exposure immediately after training might actually make you feel less sore, but slightly curtail the training response that you end up getting because you're restricting the actual, rather than always chasing recovery, sometimes allow yourself to be a bit fatigued.
Well, it comes down to that whole thing.
Take more time.
But that whole idea around reducing inflammation, like the whole debate around ice at the moment, I was talking to one of my clients about it yesterday. It's inflammation used to be thought of as solely negative. Now we have an understanding that some degree of inflammation is probably going to be a part of the process, part of the signaling cascade for development, for recovery. And then too much inflammation is, again, going to be negative because too much inflammation is actually going to drive things to the area that might lead to more degradation, more breakdown. So it's finding that balance. And then the other final thing to add was the whole idea around the acceptable level of training load and making sure that if you are doing a recovery session, you're doing it at low enough intensity that it can actually be recovery. And that's going to be so much lower than you might think, because we're looking at basically getting into a position where we're not creating enough of a stimulus that it's going to improve a fitness component. We're not even trying to maintain that fitness component with the stimulus that we're providing. We're almost coming in at a detraining load. So there's enough work being done that it is driving blood flow to the area, but it's not even enough that it's going to necessarily maintain your fitness level. It's just going to stop you from, well, it's just extra work that's going to help increase the rate of recovery of other systems.
You're not even hitting a threshold.
No.
You're just
moving.
Yeah. And, understand the time scales that you're working with and what you're training. So just final summary, active recovery is a thing. You can do it. Just be sensible and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yep.
And you'll be good.
Exactly. Right.
Happy days.
Cool.
Nice. Done.
Done.